The fluorescent lights of the Blue Corner diner hummed persistently against the gathering darkness of the Connecticut autumn evening. Sarah Mitchell wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day, her movements mechanical after 12 hours on her feet. The clock above the kitchen window showed 10:45 p.m., 15 minutes until closing, and her shoulders ached with the familiar weight of another long shift. Through the front windows, Hartford's streets glistened with recent rain, the occasional car sending sheets of water across the asphalt. Sarah's reflection in the chrome coffee machine showed dark circles under her eyes, a testament to months of working double shifts while trying to help her younger sister. "Amy, stay afloat in her second year at UConn." "15 minutes, Sarah," called Marcus, the night manager, his voice carrying the edge it always did near closing time. "I'm not paying overtime again this month." Sarah nodded, already gathering menus from empty booths. The diner's regular customers had cleared out early tonight, driven home by the weather and the early darkness of late autumn. Only 2 tables remained occupied, an elderly couple finishing their pie and a truck driver nursing his 3rd cup of coffee. The bell above the door chimed at 10:52 p.m. Sarah's stomach tightened as she turned, already rehearsing the speech about kitchen closing times. The words died in her throat as JOHN CENA's unmistakable figure filled the doorway, his broad shoulders highlighted by the street lamp outside. He was wearing a simple black hoodie and jeans, clearly trying to maintain a low profile after what Sarah knew had been a WWE event at the XL Center earlier that evening. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, his expression darkening. "We're closing," he announced flatly, ignoring Sarah's pleading look. Cena's posture remained relaxed, but Sarah caught the slight tightening around his eyes, the look of someone used to being turned away despite their fame. "Just hoping for a quick bite," he said, his voice carrying that same warm tone she'd heard in countless interviews. Been a long night. Sarah found herself stepping forward before she could second-guess the decision. "I can take your order," she offered, already reaching for a menu. The look Marcus shot her could have curdled milk. "Mitchell, kitchen closes in 8 minutes. You serve him, you're responsible for cleanup and closing. No overtime." Sarah's mind raced through quick calculations. Amy's textbook bill was due next week, and her own rent wasn't far behind. But something in Cena's tired expression, the way he stood there looking more like an exhausted worker than a celebrity, made the decision for her. "I understand," she said, leading Cena to a booth by the window. The next 20 minutes unfolded in a blur of quiet efficiency. Sarah took his order, a turkey club and black coffee, and relayed it to the kitchen just before Carlos, the cook, could shut down the grill. While Cena ate, she finished her closing duties, aware of Marcus's disapproving glare from his office. What struck her most was how Cena seemed to notice everything, the way he carefully stacked his dishes to make cleanup easier, how he used minimal napkins, his genuine thank you every time she refilled his coffee. They chatted briefly about the evening's event, his voice growing animated as he described the energy of the Hartford crowd. "You didn't have to stay open for me," he said as she brought his check, his eyes showing genuine concern. "I hope it doesn't cause trouble." Sarah managed to smile, thinking of the next day's inevitable confrontation with Marcus. "It's no trouble. Everyone deserves a good meal after a long day's work." After he left, leaving a tip that made her breath catch, Sarah finished cleaning in record time. The night air had turned bitter cold by the time she locked up at 11:45 p.m., her breath forming clouds in the empty parking lot. Tomorrow would bring consequences, she knew, but something about the evening felt right, despite everything. What she didn't notice was Cena lingering in his car across the street, watching thoughtfully as she walked to her bus stop, already pulling out her phone to check on Amy. The morning light filtering through the diner's windows did nothing to soften Marcus's expression as Sarah arrived for her 7 a.m. shift. She had barely hung up her coat when his sharp "Mitchell office" cut through the breakfast rush chatter. Marcus's office was a cramped space that smelled perpetually of old coffee and cigarettes, though Sarah had never seen him smoke. He sat behind his desk, a manila folder open before him, her employee file laid bare under the harsh overhead light. "6 times, he began, each word measured and cold. "6 times in the past month you've stayed past closing. 3 overtime violations. 2 customer complaints about early closing being enforced. And now this, keeping the kitchen open for a celebrity when we have clear policies about closing times." Sarah stood straight, her waitress uniform suddenly feeling too tight around her throat. "The customer was polite. I handled all the closing duties myself, and there were no overtime charges to the diner. This isn't about one customer, Mitchell. It's about authority and rules. Every time you bend them, it undermines my position with other staff. He closed the folder with a sharp snap. I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow, but Sarah forced herself to remain composed. I understand, she managed, though her mind was already racing through bills, responsibilities, Amy's tuition payment looming like a storm cloud. Your final check will be mailed. Turn in your apron and name tag. The walk through the diner felt endless. Regular customers watched with concerned expressions as she gathered her things, their whispered conversations following her out the door. In the parking lot, she finally allowed herself to lean against her car, hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. The screen was already lit with notifications, dozens of them. A local news website had posted security camera footage from the previous night, the grainy video showing her interaction with Cena. The story was gaining traction, with social media users already taking sides. Waitress fired for serving JOHN CENA after hours. Local diner faces backlash over staff termination. Blue Corner Diner trending as wrestling fans react. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Amy. OMG sis, you're everywhere online. Are you okay? Call me. The next few hours passed in a surreal blur. Local news vans began appearing outside the diner, their reporters gathering like wolves sensing a story. Sarah watched from a coffee shop across the street as Marcus gave increasingly agitated interviews, his face reddening with each repetition of, "It's a personnel matter," and "We have policies." By afternoon, the story had evolved beyond a simple termination. Wrestling fans had uncovered Sarah's social media profiles, sharing posts about her working multiple jobs to support her sister's education. Someone found an old GoFundMe she'd started for Amy's first-year textbooks. The narrative was shifting, becoming something larger than one night's decision. Sarah's phone rang, an unknown number with a Connecticut area code. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was professional, feminine. "This is Angela Martinez from WVT-NBC Connecticut. We'd like to have you on our evening news to tell your side of the story." Sarah thought of Amy watching from her dorm room, of Marcus in his cramped office, of all the other service workers who'd faced similar choices. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'd like to tell my story." The studio lights were harsher than she'd imagined, but Sarah found her nervousness fading as she spoke. She talked about customer service, about human dignity, about making choices that felt right even when they carried a cost. The words flowed naturally, drawing from years of experience and genuine belief in treating people with respect. "I don't regret my decision," she concluded, looking directly into the camera. "Sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences, but that doesn't make it any less right." As she left the studio, her phone buzzed with another notification. JOHN CENA had shared the interview on his social media, adding a simple comment that would change everything. "Character isn't what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you do when you think no one is." Respect. The morning sun had barely touched the Hartford skyline when Sarah's phone began its endless dance of notifications. JOHN CENA's social media post had acted like a match to dry kindling, igniting a firestorm of public interest that spread far beyond Connecticut's borders. National morning shows were leading with the story, their hosts dissecting the security footage with the intensity usually reserved for breaking news. Sarah watched, curled up on her small apartment couch, as her simple act of kindness was transformed into a trending topic. WWE star highlights, workplace ethics debate, service industry story sparks national conversation. Blue Corner Diner faces mounting public pressure, Amy called during a brief lull in the media chaos. "Sarah, have you seen the donations?" Her voice trembled with excitement. "People are finding my old GoFundMe and, sis, there's enough for next semester's tuition, and it's still going up." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Amy, don't you dare apologize," her sister interrupted. "You've carried everything for so long." Maybe it's time the universe gave something back. The universe, it seemed, wasn't finished giving. By midday, WWE's corporate communications department released a statement that sent social media into another frenzy. WWE has always valued integrity, respect, and doing what's right. Sarah Mitchell's actions exemplify these principles. We've reached out to Sarah and look forward to discussing how her commitment to these values might find a home in the WWE family. The statement was followed by an email that made Sarah's hands shake, an invitation to meet with WWE's community relations team. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at their headquarters in Stamford. Local businesses began taking sides. Other diners in Hartford offered Sarah jobs, their owners eager to associate with the positive publicity. The Blue Corner Diner's Yelp page was flooded with negative reviews, forcing Marcus to issue a public statement that struck Sarah as more damage control than genuine reflection. While we stand by our policies, we acknowledge that exceptional circumstances sometimes require flexibility. We are reviewing our procedures to better serve our community. But it was the afternoon's developments that truly showed how far the story had spread. A major morning show wanted to feature Sarah in a segment about workplace ethics and customer service. Several prominent social media influencers in the service industry began sharing their own stories of choosing between policy and humanity. Each post tagged with, "Shakya, be more Sarah." The weight of it all hit her as she sat in her favorite local coffee shop, trying to find a moment of normalcy. The barista, Jenny, slid her usual order across the counter with a warm smile. "You know," Jenny said, "what you did? It's what we all wish we could do. Sometimes one person standing up makes it easier for the rest of us to do the same." Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another interview request, another offer, another wave of support. But something had shifted in her perspective. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about one night's decision. It had become something larger, a conversation about dignity in service work, about human connection in an increasingly corporate world. John Cena's team reached out late that evening, requesting a meeting before the WWE corporate discussion. His message was simple but profound. Sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest choices. Let's talk about making more of those impacts together. As Sarah prepared for bed that night, exhausted but oddly energized, Amy sent one final text. "Mom would be so proud of you, sis. Not just for what you did, but for how you're handling all of this. You're showing everyone what real strength looks like." Sarah looked out her window at the Hartford night, the city lights blurring through happy tears. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more opportunities, more chances to make a difference. For the first time in years, she felt ready for whatever came next. The WWE headquarters in Stamford loomed before Sarah, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. She adjusted her blazer, newly purchased for this meeting, and tried to calm her racing heart. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparation. Mock interviews with Amy's communications professor, countless hours researching WWE's community outreach programs, and a crash course in corporate culture from a kind LinkedIn connection who'd reached out after seeing her story. The lobby was a testament to wrestling history, with championship belts and larger-than-life photos of legendary moments adorning the walls. Sarah found herself drawn to a display about WWE's community involvement, Make-A-Wish partnerships, anti-bullying campaigns, hospital visits. Each image told a story of impact beyond the ring. "Ms. Mitchell?" A professional voice drew her attention. "I'm Patricia Reynolds, Director of Community Relations. Thank you for coming in today." The meeting room overlooked the Stamford Harbor, but Sarah barely noticed the view. She was focused on the faces around the table. Patricia, two other executives whose names she carefully memorized, and surprisingly, John Cena himself, who had insisted on being part of the discussion. "What impressed us most," Patricia began, "wasn't just your action that night, but how you've handled everything since. Your media appearances have been thoughtful, focusing on the larger issues rather than personal gain. That's exactly the perspective we value in our community outreach programs." The conversation that followed wasn't what Sarah had expected. Instead of a standard job interview, it was a collaborative discussion about creating meaningful change. They talked about her experiences in customer service, her ideas for community engagement, her understanding of how small acts of kindness could create ripple effects. "We'd like to offer you a position as Community Relations Coordinator," Patricia announced. "You'd work with our outreach teams, helping develop and implement programs that promote the values you've already demonstrated. The role would include significant input in our service industry initiatives." The salary they mentioned made Sarah's head spin, more than triple what she'd made at the diner. But it was the opportunities beyond the paycheck that caught her attention. Full health benefits, tuition assistance that could help Amy, and a chance to make a real difference. "There's something else," Cena added, leaning forward. "I'm launching a foundation focused on supporting service industry workers' education and development. We'd like you to be part of its advisory board. Your perspective would be invaluable." Sarah thought of all the late-night shifts, the aching feet, the carefully counted tips. She thought of other workers still facing those same challenges. "I have some ideas," she began, pulling out a carefully prepared notebook, about how we could create meaningful change. The next few hours flew by in a flurry of discussion, planning, and possibility. By the time Sarah left the building, the sun was setting over Stamford, casting long shadows across the parking lot. She sat in her car for a moment, letting it all sink in. Her phone buzzed. Amy again. How did it go? Sarah smiled, thinking of the signed offer letter in her briefcase. Remember how Mom always said everything happens for a reason? I think I finally understand what she meant. The drive home was surreal. Hartford's familiar streets seemed different somehow, full of possibility rather than worn routine. She thought of the diner, of Marcus, of all the twists that had led her here. There was no bitterness now, only gratitude and determination. The next morning, Sarah's first official act in her new role was to announce a partnership between WWE and several national restaurant chains, creating a scholarship program for service workers pursuing education or career development. The Blue Corner Diner, under new management after Marcus's sudden retirement, was among the first to sign up. 6 months later, Sarah stood at a podium in Hartford, addressing the first class of scholarship recipients. The crowd included Amy, now interning with WWE's marketing department between classes, and JOHN CENA, whose initial act of understanding had set everything in motion. Success isn't just about climbing the ladder, Sarah told them, her voice carrying the warmth of hard-won wisdom. It's about reaching back to help others up. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices, like staying an extra 15 minutes to serve a late-night customer. The applause that followed wasn't just for her words. It was for every server who'd ever chosen kindness over convenience, every worker who'd put humanity before policy, every person who'd dared to believe that doing the right thing mattered. As Sarah left the stage, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of the Blue Corner Diner's new sign.
Welcome 24/7, where kindness never closes. She smiled, knowing that sometimes the best endings are really just new beginnings in disguise.